Well, it gives me great pleasure to get or to interact with Mr. Umang Vohra of Cipla. This is one interaction I always look forward to, not only to understand what is happening with Cipla, but also to understand that which way things medically are progressing and what is the new initiative Cipla is working on in order to protect our lives and in order to make our lives better. Mr. Vohra, always a pleasure to have you on ET Now. Thank you for joining us. Let's start our today's interaction with not a smile, but with a very big smile on your face. Brokerages across the board have upgraded the price target for your stocks. Your margin is the highest in last couple of quarters, and your portfolio, both for the generic market, India, and other markets also, is growing at an extraordinary pace.
Thank you, Nikunj. Thank you.
Okay, so let's first understand the numbers in a granular manner. Most of the reports I've come across, they are saying, look, Cipla has done well, but the reason why Cipla has done well is because there was a large COVID tailwind which has added to a top line as well as cost control. Is it true?
Yes, I think if I was to look at, let's break the two parts out. So if I was to look at, let's say, top line or bottom line, we have gone out and said that in half one, on account of COVID, our top line and bottom line have been roughly about 5% of the company's total overall results. Right? So 95% of the balance is what the company has been able to do despite COVID. So that's number one. Number two, yes, cost control, of course. I mean, I think with COVID, why only Cipla? Every other company, every other industry has gone through a period where they're beginning to reimagine costs. A lot of these costs are not just because of activity not happening, but because we are figuring out how to do these more digitally as against more physically. So yes, I mean, if it's a culmination of both. It's a culmination of the ability to keep costs in control, and it's a culmination of trying to drive revenue growth with products that make sense at the point in time.
So if COVID would have not happened, what would have happened to the earnings trajectory?
So we had already guided, Nikunj, if you remember, we had already guided that the earnings trajectory would perhaps have gone up to the 22% odd mark. So with COVID, of course, we are higher, but that not all of it is because of COVID per se. It's also because of the way that we have managed our business during this time. So a lot of our spend base has got reimagined, right? We are trying to do virtual cycle meetings for our medical reps. We're trying to do virtual audits at our facilities and plants, right? And it's also because we can't travel, but it's also because we are trying to see what could be the next wave of reimagination of how we can conduct our business. So digital has made a difference. And I think that's the uptick we are seeing. But initially we had guided for about 22% odd of EBITDA.
Let me ask you a big picture question. And when I interact with some of your shareholders, they have a following template, Mr. Vohra, which is that COVID is a respiratory disease, and a respiratory disease needs an inhaler, which means that the inhaler market, where Cipla has a large leadership, has a very large, when I say scope, I don't mean it in a good manner, but it has a very large potential to grow for a pharma company. So is the assumption true that COVID is a respiratory disease and this is something which is going to aid Cipla's respiratory business?
So I think, Nikunj, it aids people who have asthma who are afflicted with COVID, unfortunately. But for a regular patient who has COVID, we haven't really seen cases of inhaler use go up substantially because of that. But it does help those patients who are asthmatic or those patients who are borderline respiratory challenged, right? They are the people who begin to see inhaler sales expand. So on a YTD basis, we haven't seen abnormal growth on our inhaler franchise. But yes, respiratory is a COVID disease. But if you look at most ways of treating it, there is only a very small overlap with the inhaler universe. So that is one thing I would say. The second is, I think what is required in times like today, Nikunj, is a lot more of agility. because I think the way we have looked at our therapies in the last 6 months or 9 months, there has been a huge change. Therapies, for example, as people stay at home, you would realize that while COVID has struck, the regular flu that comes has actually come down considerably. And so there is a changing mix of therapies and diseases. At the same time, we have realized that conditions like urology, which are largely an old people's disease, has led to less people going to meet urologists at the same time. I think what is most important for any company, including us like Cipla, is just the ability to cope with the agility the market offers, right? So if the market is now offering a situation where there are more patients for COVID or there are more patients in certain conditions, that we also structure our response accordingly. So I think our story in the last 6 to 9 months has just been the ability of using the adversity that people are going through, using the adversity that the society at large is going through, and bringing product offerings that are helping that. And in lies, that links back with our revenue, links back with how we do as a company. So I think there's been a shift and a churn in the market. And some part of COVID will always stay. My belief is the disease may become endemic.